Welcome to the Barrel Room Chronicles. I'm Carrie Moynihan, a certified bourbon steward, former bartender, and all-around whiskey aficionado. I travel the world to explore whiskey from every avenue. For the last 20 years, I've been helping others tell their stories through television, film, and other media. But now I'm taking my love for whiskey and my experience in the entertainment industry to uncover the fascinating stories of the water of life. So kick off your shoes, pour yourself a dram, and join me for this episode of Barrel Room Chronicles.
If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. With everything you need all in one place. Let me explain. It's free. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple, and more. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
It is 5 o'clock somewhere, and you've tuned in to episode 3 of BRC. Today, in our Tales from the Still segment, I speak with Andy Faris and Jeff Murphy of JK Williams Distillery. And later in the show, I'll speak with Chef Louise Leonard in today's World of Wheezy. But first up is Dram Diaries. Stay with us. Over 100 years ago, Peoria, Illinois, was the whiskey capital of the world and home to more than 73 distilleries. Legend has it that the tax on distilled spirits produced in Peoria alone accounted for nearly half the revenue of the entire federal government at its time. Therefore, it's easy to say that whiskey was a very big deal in Peoria. Many wealthy distillers and brewers lived there, funding projects that built landmarks that you can still visit today. One such distiller was JK Williams, whose recipes helped Peoria earn recognition for not only a large quantity of product, but also the quality of the whiskey it produced. But as we all know, things changed drastically in the spirits industry in 1920 when the 18th Amendment prohibited the production and sale of alcohol. Williams was one of the many distillers who moved his operations into the backwoods, continuing to produce and sell quality whiskey despite the harsh penalties during Prohibition. He continued his operation for a number of years, but eventually, fearing gangsters like Al Capone, he left his backwoods operation and moved his family to Decatur. Nearly 100 years later, his great-grandsons discovered the family's whiskey recipes and created JK Williams Distilling, a modern-day homage to the golden age of whiskey in Peoria. However, just before the COVID pandemic hit in 2019, the Williams family sold the distillery to Andy and Stacy Faris, who proudly continue to make the brand's whiskey using the original recipes first created by JK Williams. Up next in Tales from the Still, we speak with owner Andy Faris and master distiller Jeff Murphy about their journey and their plans to keep the JK Williams legacy alive. Stay with us. Well, hello, gentlemen. I have the pleasure of speaking today with the owner and master distiller at JK Williams Distilling. Andy Faris is the owner. Say hi, Andy. Hi, Andy.
Hi, Carrie.
And then Jeff Murphy is the master distiller. Hi, Jeff.
Hello, Carrie. How are you doing?
I'm great. So as we always start out, I wanted to talk to you guys about your whiskey journeys. Now, Andy, I was reading your bio. I don't see much whiskey involved in your bio.
I drank a lot of whiskey.
Oh, there you go.
And
see, you were heavily in the IT world.
Was very much and worked for a British networking company for 15 years. And so I started really on single malt that I loved, and it's evolved into a love of bourbon and other American whiskey. And so, but it started with really being exposed to single malts in the UK and Europe.
Okay. And so how did being an IT guy, how did you take that leap into turning your career into the president of JK Williams Distilling?
When you spend 35 years doing the same thing and you get a little burned out, you start dreaming about other avenues that might
what you really want to do when you grow up.
You start going, the runway is getting limited. This might be more fun. So they said, this will be fun. So
go ahead.
No, so I started looking into starting a distillery and really knew nothing. And Jeff may say I still know nothing, but I do. I mean, I knew a fair bit about the industry, and had a little bit of background. I was on the board of directors of a craft brewery in Fort Worth, Texas. So knew a little bit about the alcohol industry, but really did not have any of the pieces put together. And I was just looking around. I was at a mergers and acquisitions conference in Minneapolis in 2015, and about the distilling industry. And my name was on a list, and I got contacted at some point about this opportunity to acquire a distillery. It started towards the end of 2017, and wow. A lot of stops and starts, and we ended up acquiring this in April of 2019.
Wow, how fun! So when you acquired it, what stage was the distillery in when you received it?
Well, it was on hiatus. So the owners had, I affectionately call it run out of gas, but they had some health problems. They had families, they had full-time jobs. And I saw a lot of potential. There was a lot of inventory there. I saw an opportunity to rebrand it. And it was really built to be a boutique with not a lot of expansion capability. And so our original concept was let's see what does this look like reimagined? Who do we need? And how can it be a multi-state and a regional kind of powerhouse in the future? What do we need to get there? And so that took a lot of planning and a lot of, we acquired in April of 2019. We didn't launch until relaunch. The company never went out of business. It was just on hiatus, stopped production. So we relaunched with products in the market a year ago, October.
Wow, that's pretty cool. And then, Jeff, you seem to have a bit more of the distilling and brewing background. I see that you were a Navy man, and there's something about a 5-gallon fermenter that you were doing at work.
It was actually a brew in a bag. It was a burlap bag type thing, and you just poured hot water in it, and it went through the grains and then fermented in the bottom, and I had that hanging in my locker.
When I read that in your bio, I started laughing because I just was watching an old episode of MASH, and it was the one right after Radar left the show, and BJ Honeycutt goes nuts and he breaks the still, and Hawkeye was like,
"What are you doing?
Broke the still?
What have you
done?"
I
thought, I'm like, oh God, sacrilege! How dare he? So when I saw that you were a Navy man making your own stuff, I was like, oh yeah, it's like MASH.
Yeah. Yep. It was a lot of fun. It was a stress reliever when I was doing it back then, and ended up being a career.
So how did you take this 5-gallon fermenter in your locker and turn it into a career in whiskey?
I guess, what fascinated me the most was, in the mid 90s in the craft brew industry, one of them, the one that really got me started was Pete's Wicked Ale. Back then it was only seasonal. It only came out in the fall. But it was a brown ale, if I remember right. And I grew up drinking, illegally drinking. We'll go down that path. But, the cheap stuff, Keystone and Schlitz and stuff like that. And I went down to the hydroplane races in San Diego when I was stationed out there. And a couple of Marines were doing their table, volunteering to sell beer. And I tried to go up there with my military ID, and they saw that I was, underage, and they're like, I was 20 at the time. And so close, that close.
Right.
And we were able to drink on base. We just couldn't drink off base. So anyway, long story short is they started sneaking me. They found out I was a hospital corpsman. They started, passing me, selling me beers and said, just don't get drunk, but I tasted that stuff and it was really, really good. And that kind of got my start. So whenever I had the chance, whenever I was stationed someplace where I could get the supplies, I'd try to do it. So
very cool.
Guam was a little bit difficult. So was Hawaii at the time. Craft beer wasn't really big out there in those necks in the early 90s, mid 90s. So, and then when we moved back to Maryland, I took it up more full time when I was a police officer, and as a stress reliever, it chased my wife and the kids out of the house. They didn't like the smell. So it was just me and the dog brewing beer on the weekends.
Nice.
And then when we got transferred to Singapore, that's where it became a career. So I was brought on as a assistant brewer, scrubbing floors and
wait, you were a cop and you got transferred to Singapore?
Well, my wife was still in the military. So,
okay.
Yeah. So,
It's like, how does that work?
yeah, no. So we did 7 years in Maryland, and 6 of those, 5.5 of those were police officer out there. And then, so when we got to Singapore, that's how I started. I got hired on. I was in the brew club and a little brew pub down there. Lost their assistant brewer, and I was the one that came in with samples to taste, of my home brew. And he took me across the street and said, "Let's go for a walk." And went to the owner, said, "I want him." So
Nice.
So I did that in brewing in Singapore for a few years, and then a little bit in Texas when we got back from Singapore, and then I jumped into distilling in San Antonio.
Okay. So how long ago was San Antonio?
That was 2010.
Okay. So 11 years.
Yeah, 11 years distilling, and 3. I was looking for a brew pub temporarily in San Antonio. So 14, 15 years of brewing, between brewing and distilling, I should say. When I was at Rebecca Creek there, we started doing vodka, rectifying vodka, and then basically single malt whiskey. And I was doing it from a point of view of a craft brewer. So I was already mixing the grains together and everything else, trying to get different flavor profiles. And I really only made one batch there before they changed their plan. They didn't want to be a from scratch distillery anymore. They wanted to just be a blending company. So just want to buy it and blend it, which is fine. So then I moved to rum, went to Massachusetts, did rum for a year. And then before coming here, I was in Louisiana running Louisiana Spirits for the last 8 years, last 2 years as operations director. And then I was production manager basically for the 6 years before that. So, and now I'm here.
So how did Andy find you, or how did you find Andy? How did this relationship come to be?
Hey, it's that commercial Indeed. So, it was during the pandemic. I was already trying to find an avenue out of, still Louisiana Spirits got bought out by Stoli Group. And after, a year and a half or so of the corporate life, I was burning out myself and didn't want to be part of that anymore. So I was trying to find a way out, and then COVID happened. So with all the cutbacks and everything else, I was just sitting at home, and when things were starting to open up, I started looking for jobs and went to a few around the U.S. And Andy and his wife Stacy, they interviewed me a couple times on Zoom, and then they said, "Why don't you come up and bring your wife with you? I want to make sure she approves as well." My wife's from Kansas. I'm from Arizona, so there's direct flights from here to Phoenix, and there's we're 8-hour drive to Kansas to her family over there. So it's just kind of worked out. We like the Midwest feel. So, and the story of JK Williams and the history of Peoria, everything's there to relaunch it. It's not like you're starting a brand from scratch. There's already a history there that we could work with. So that was a lot of the reason to come up here. And also, when I first came over for the interview in person, it's like, let's taste the juice to make sure I have something good to work with to start versus trying to fix something that had a problem. And they were making excellent products when they were open. So.
Oh, that's awesome. So when did they originally open, and how long were they originally? How big did they get before you guys took over?
They were operating off when we say small batch. This was a 60-gallon pot still.
Oh wow!
Really small. Now we'll talk about this in a little bit about our future, what we've got on order, and the large system that we've got coming in. But it really was small batch, and they started in 2012, and really by 2017, they were looking to move on from this. And I think it's pretty impossible to have a full-time job and do this, on a limited scale, and also have any expandability capabilities. So the possibilities were limited. So again, what I saw is exactly what Jeff saw, was a legitimate story with a very rich history of distilling here in Peoria, that, again, just kind of reimagined and relaunched, and with the goal being to reestablish Peoria as a renowned whiskey making center, as it was back in its heyday prior to Prohibition, when it was the whiskey capital of the world. So
let's tell everybody a little bit more in depth about JK Williams and why he's so important.
So JK Williams is a central figure, as a legitimate guy, not a fictional character, like some other brands. I won't name them, but a legitimate guy. He was a distiller, worked for some of the big distilleries in town. When Prohibition came around, he had a family to support, and he turned to bootlegging and continued bootlegging quietly until he ran afoul of the criminal element in Peoria, which included the infamous O'Neill brothers, but also Al Capone ran a huge bootlegging operation through Peoria, right up the Illinois River to Chicago, and the rail systems. And it was really an amazing time. The stills, probably the big commercial ones, stopped, but certainly not the bootlegging operations.
Not the 60-gallon ones.
Yeah, right. And so JK, with his 9 children and family, eventually fled in the middle of the night to Decatur to get away from this.
It's like The Sound of Music.
I know. Well, pretty much.
Did they sing too?
Yeah, if they did, the Von Trapp family, the Von Williams family.
Whatever you do, don't ask Andy to sing, please.
I take it you've heard him sing karaoke night?
Unfortunately.
Regrettably. And so, the history here, though, is what really drew me to this. And like all great river towns, and this town was built on a bustling economy of corn, grain trade, and distilling. That's what built this town. Not Caterpillar, as everyone might think, but really the town was built on whiskey. So
now the former owners, so they chose the JK Williams name. I'm assuming that was not on the same site as anything that he had done.
No. And it was coincidence, but it's John and Cassie and Jesse, and anyway, they actually, their initials were JK, and the original great grandfather was JK. So
oh wow,
it's a great coincidence. And our view on it is they started a great foundation, and we really want to carry on the legacy of the namesake of the company and make it as legitimate as possible, and not ever try to hoodwink the public with anything that isn't real.
Right.
So
let's talk a little bit about the whiskeys you have. Jeff, I got one sample. Well, I got 3 samples, but they were all the same wheat, which I hear is the new one. Now, did you get to make this from scratch, or was this part of the goods you took over?
So we have 3 expressions. You have the American wheat whiskey, which is our latest one. The other 2 we have is Gold Zephyr bourbon and our Stormy River rye. And those 2 are original juices that we got with the barrels that we procured with the buying of the company. So what you're tasting now is an American wheat whiskey. This is part of our bridge series, which is there's 4 bridges that go over the Illinois River here. And then also it's going to bridge the gap between the lapses in production. They stopped production in the middle of 2017. And we just started production back up again this year. So it's meant to bridge that gap. So this is a blend of 16 barrels of our product and 16 barrels of a source product that we're blending together. And so our bourbon's wheated as well. And then this is just a wheat whiskey that we got on the market, and it's a very light. It's at 94 proof.
Yeah.
And it's I tell people, if you don't like the bite of bourbon or rye, then this is kind of a nice little entry level light. I wouldn't say a light whiskey, but an easier sipping whiskey than a bourbon or a rye would be.
I would have to agree with that.
And I think one of the things, Jeff and I, again, a very tough job here. We got to sample as we were looking to source, what are we going to blend with our American whiskey? We got a bunch of samples in, and you end up getting down to the point where you say, okay, what really is the best? And so Jeff blended, I don't know how many samples, but we kept going back to this one saying this is the best.
Yeah.
And it ended up being this 95% wheat whiskey blended. So it's 73% of the sourced wheat whiskey blended with 27% of our American whiskey. And we think it turned out terrific.
It's very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's got a Pappy-esque to it with the wheat.
And everything they did before was in small barrels. So it's 23 and 30 gallon barrels is everything they did. So it's 16 23 gallon barrels and 16 53 gallon barrels. So that's why there's the difference. That's why it's not closer to 50 to 50. So
that makes sense. I was going to say, when you were talking about the best part of the job, I have to agree, because that's the best part of my job, to get to not only talk to all you great whiskey makers, but to taste all the products. It's really great to be able to do this, because especially during the pandemic, when, all the local club tastings and the bars that would have tastings, they, couldn't really do it anymore, or it would move online, and then you had to ship stuff, but then half the time you couldn't ship stuff, and it just got so convoluted. So it was kind of nice to be able to do this with the makers.
It was a very difficult. I mean, you bring up a really good point. How difficult? Yeah, I guess had we known how difficult, I'm not sure we'd be sitting here. It was a really incredibly difficult time to actually launch a product, and the distributors had a horrendous 2020. Probably most of them laid off staff and furloughed people. And I think 2021 is still suffering from a little bit of a hangover from that as things return to some sense of normalcy. But, looking back on it, that's one thing we really missed, the clubs and that word of mouth. It's really difficult to hit that type of demographic because they're great. They're wonderful whiskey aficionados. And so to get those people and get that word of mouth, because they're fervent followers of new whiskeys. And so we kind of missed out on that, but we've built up some great momentum here, and, we're really excited about where we're headed.
Well, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to help build that momentum and get the word out. In fact, I think we need to do a cheers to that, but I just ran out of my dram. So, all right. Cheers to that, gentlemen.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Okay. So you have 3 whiskeys. Do you have other spirits, or are you going to have other spirits?
We will. We're keeping the formulations of the Gold Zephyr bourbon and the Stormy River Rye. We're keeping those recipes the same because that's what the family passed down to us. But as you know, it's hard to be a one-trick pony to a certain extent. So, there's plans to have single malt. There's plans to do some other variations of bourbon. Whether it's higher corn, like ours is a wheated bourbon. It's 80% corn, 10% wheat, and 10% barley. And the rye is 80% rye. 90% rye, 10% barley. So
that's high rye. That's great.
It is. Yeah. So, then I have a great rum background as well. So I'll be doing a rum, some gins maybe on the side. But I think really our goal, we're working off, as Annie was saying, the old equipment, which is a 60-gallon still. They had a 120-gallon still that never commissioned, so we got that up and running too. And we only have one 240-gallon fermenter, so it takes me two weeks to basically make a barrel of spirits.
Wow!
Our new system, we're going to have 4 1,000-gallon fermenters and a 1,000-gallon still. So with that, I'll be able to do that, and we'll have 10 to 12 barrels a week. Versus a barrel every 2 weeks.
Now, do you have everything on the same physical lot, or do you have to have part of your distillery over here, part of the tasting room over here? I mean, how does that break down?
It's this is an old dry clean facility, so it's 20,000 square feet.
Right.
Okay.
So they had everything that we needed. So everything was kind of a reclamation project to a certain extent. They either we couldn't find a place that had trench drains, steam, fire suppression, everything that we needed, plenty of water, plenty of power to do something like this. So we'd always have to bring everything in. And then I'd come up for a visit before and looked at a few places, and we knew we were going to be spending a lot of money getting into these. And then when I was moving up here, right before that, Andy goes, "Jeff, I found this perfect place."
Wait a minute. So this isn't the location that the previous owners had. You guys picked out this new place. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, there used to be an East Peoria, and when they closed down, they subleased everything out. So everything was crammed into one side. So even if we wanted to stay there,
we had about a quarter of the original building in the original Barrel Room.
Yeah.
So that's all we had in the end, and they'd already leased out. Out the 3/4 of the building. So we really didn't want to stay there. We wanted some expansion capability. So Jeff and I spent quite a bit of time looking around, and I think reclamation project is an understatement. Some of the buildings we looked at, the Peoria Industrial Riverfront had some gigantic warehouses, but they were legitimate reclamation projects. They're just no fire suppression, no anything. Right. And
so everything was here when we found this one, and we just had to upgrade it. It hadn't been updated since the early 80s, probably.
Oh, wow.
So we still had to spend a lot of money, significant money on, updating the fire suppression, updating, the boilers hadn't been used for a year or so. So I had to get those re-inspected and move things around, but it had everything that we needed. So, it really was a good catch for us. Yeah, it was good.
Now I'm going to start looking for old dry cleaner places to do my distillery.
Well,
it's halfway there.
They got particularly hard hit, during the pandemic.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Unfortunately, I think we were all walking around in golf shorts and t-shirts. And
I went through a lot more PJs than. Yeah.
There was no dry cleaning taking place, during that time, and so I feel bad for that whole business. But no, it did. We found this building. It's in an industrial park, but it actually has fit the bill for what we needed quite nicely. And
that's perfect.
And it's got the expansion room that we needed.
So far in this journey together with JK, what has been your favorite part?
I think getting products to market was a thrill. I mean, Jeff and I, we didn't have a bottling line, so we had to search around for a bottler. And someone said, you should talk to the guys who make rum chata out of Milwaukee. They've got a contract bottling facility, and they ended up bottling our first run of products. And everyone in Illinois was making hand sanitizer during that summer of 2020.
Right.
And so to see our products come off the line and then go, introduce them to the public was really a lot of fun. And then when the awards started rolling in at the end of 2020, once we entered a couple of competitions, and then it really carried on. It's carried on throughout 2021. I mean, amazingly. So we've been, thrilled. It seems like every time we turn around, we've gotten some accolade and some recognition, which has just been great. And it wasn't, as Jeff and I say, it's not about us. It's not Faris or Murphy Distilling. It's JK Williams. Right. But it was really important for us to, again, reestablish Peoria as a place that people go, hey, check out that whiskey if you can find it. We're only distributed in Illinois and Wisconsin today. So, it's been
so
really fun.
I'm one of the lucky Californians who get to have some of this.
Yes.
That's awesome. Well, I would definitely like to try the rye and the bourbon if you would be so kind.
We'll get you samples of that for sure.
That'd be great.
And our bourbon, we got Best in State with the ACSA Heartland Whiskey Awards on the bourbon. They give out each one for a state in the Midwest. And then we just got
double gold on rye at the 50 Best. They just had one of their rye tastings, and so that was cool to win that. And we're on severe allocation on the rye. So it's
I bet.
Yeah, when it's gone, it's gone.
So it'll be a 100 mil instead of the.
You'll get the full compliment.
Yeah, nice.
Jeff says he's got a secret case or two stashed away somewhere. I don't know where it is.
Back in the speakeasy.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I do find some very weird spots in here though, because it's like it took me This place was, I mean, for being a dry cleaners, they hadn't cleaned it themselves in about 30 years. So I spent a good couple months up in the rafters cleaning stuff. And it took me a solid month to actually see an ironing board stuck up in a wall next to a girder. And I left it there just, to remind of what this place used to be, so.
That's funny.
But yeah, there's a lot of nooks and crannies around here to.
Yeah, I love old stories, especially, bootleg era buildings where, they go to renovate it and they pull up the floorboards or they take down a wall and they find all kinds of crazy stuff.
Well, we had, going back to the history for a second. So we were the site of the world's largest whiskey distillery. The Great Western Distillery was the largest in the world. And when Prohibition ended, Hiram Walker came in and acquired the Great Western Distillery site and started making. I always have a bottle on hand.
Nice.
Jeff and I are going to drink this soon. I'm not sure when, but this is Walker's Deluxe, distilled 8 years, aged 8 years. But this actually has been cracked. But we're going to actually have a drink of this in the next. We'll maybe send you a little sample of this too and see how we.
Oh wow!
But
fancy.
Yeah, but we've Hiram Walker made a tremendous amount of whiskey out of here, and so and that site is now an ethanol plant. They don't make whiskey there anymore, but I'm told Jeff and I are hoping to tour that soon, and I'm told there's an old bar from the turn of the last century in one of the basements. Yeah, and all the wood carving, and so.
Oh yeah, you have to send us pictures. That would be awesome. Sure.
They still have their old warehouses are still up and functional.
The rick houses are still there in downtown Peoria. It's amazing.
That is cool.
Yeah, we hope that there's a way to repurpose those and have barrel storage there at some point, but we'll see.
I mean, hey, call them up, say we got some whiskey for those rooms.
Right. These are giant buildings. There's definitely room.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing JK Williams' story and your story about acquiring this wonderful product.
Thank you.
I'm very impressed. I love this wheat whiskey. That's
great.
Really,
thank
really
you so
good.
much, Carrie.
I can't wait to try the rye and the bourbon and to see the next few products that you guys roll out.
I appreciate that very much.
World of Wheezy is up next. Stay with us.
If you like what you've seen on BRC, you'll love what's coming soon in the Barrel Room Parlor. As a member, you'll have exclusive access to various spin-off series, including The Cutting Room Floor and the Telly Award-winning series Kindred Spirits. To create your membership, visit www.barrelroomchronicles.com and click on Become a Member. Once you have chosen your membership level, you'll be able to enjoy all the extra content it has to offer. You'll even be able to participate with the show by commenting on videos and other posts. Don't wait. Sign up today for exclusive content in the Barrel Room Parlor.
Hey, Louise, how you doing today?
I am good. How you doing, Carrie?
Good. It's so wonderful to have you on the new podcast, Barrel Room Chronicles. Moving on from spirits of whiskey so we can continue this beautiful chat we like to do with all of these fun pairings and cooking outings that I like to do with you. Today, we are going to talk about JK Williams, which is just so fun that I really like that the guys over there are really trying to bring back. It was the whiskey capital of the world in Illinois before Prohibition. And I didn't even know that. So I'm really glad that they're trying to bring it back. And that wheat whiskey was great. What did you think?
I loved it. And I was reading a little bit about their history too. And it was fascinating. And I'm like, I'm from Wisconsin. Those are my homies just a little bit down south. I was like really excited to sample this whiskey. And then of course, when I was thinking about how I was going to pair it, I was like, oh my gosh, well, I have to do a version of a Chicago dog. I mean,
nice.
But a Peoria dog is what I'm calling it, because really like a little bit of the sweetness that was kind of coming through with the wheated whiskey. I thought, oh man, this would be really, really good with cooked onions. So just slow cooked caramelized onions with a good hefty dose of that whiskey to put on top of a hot dog with some grainy mustard and a bunch of pickly things. You know, you got to throw the sport peppers in there. And of course, it's got to be on a poppy seed bun. There's rules to these hot dogs in those parts. But I'm going to break it slightly with the whiskey stewed onions as my addition.
Ooh.
So yeah.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, we need the Vienna sausages. We need to make this happen very soon.
I've never had whiskey stewed onions before.
Really?
Yeah. Well, not to my knowledge. I mean, if it was in something that they didn't put it on the menu, but I mean, I would think I would have noticed that taste.
Yeah, well, I would say just as a condiment, if you need something quick and simple and delicious to pair with any type of meat or fish or even veggies, if you just saute, if you get like especially good sweet onion, like a Vidalia onion or a Walla Walla onion.
Ooh, a Walla Walla. Do we
Walla
have to go to
Walla
Washington
onion.
for that?
Yes, that's where they are. But if you slice them really thin and in a pan, you put a good amount of butter. Usually I cut it with a little bit of olive oil as well, and just throw a ton. I mean, you can have a big pot filled with sliced onions. And if you just cook that over low heat and like let it cook down, it'll cook down and caramelize. And I like to add a nice fat glug of whiskey. And then once it cooks down, all the sugars release and you get the booziness, from the whiskey, and then put that on steak, put it on a burger, put it on a hot dog, put it on, like I said, put it on whatever. I mean, if you had like roasted Brussels sprouts or something and you tossed them with a whole bunch of these caramelized whiskey onions,
then I might actually like Brussels sprouts.
Yeah, that's a good time. So yeah, so it's just a fun way to, add booze into our weekly dinners.
This totally makes me feel like I should go to the races now. And the next time we go, have you come and bring that, and then we can just pile it on the hot dogs, because it's just, I don't know, just something about what you're just describing to me. It brought me into the racing arena.
I am a full fan of BYOC, bring your own condiments.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, somewhat recently, I had a hot dog and where I got the dog only offers ketchup and mustard.
What?
Just like they don't offer any of the other things.
It was not Pink's. You did not go to Pink's. I can tell you.
No. I did. It was not Pink's. It was not Pink's. But fear not, because I roll with condiments. Knowing this, I'm like, well, I have homemade pickled chilies in my refrigerator. I've been making a fermented hot sauce that's pretty bomb that I've been kind of putting on everything these days. I brought the sauerkraut. I'm like, I'll bring my own condiments. If you're not going to provide them for me, that's not a problem. So the whiskey onions would be part of that.
Fantastic. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, Louise, this is great. I really can't wait to try this because, as I said, I've never even knew it was a thing. And so I can't wait to try it. And next time we go to the races, you bring the condiments, I'll get the hot dogs. And until next time, have a great week. Have a great couple of weeks. And we'll see you next time with our next whiskey.
That sounds great. Cheers.
For show notes on today's episode, please visit www.barrelroomchronicles.com. If you like what you heard, please rate and subscribe to the podcast. If you really liked it and want to show your support, buy us a whiskey through our Ko-fi site. If you work in the whiskey industry or run a whiskey bar or club, and you'd like to be featured on Barrel Room Chronicles, register to be a guest through our website. Thanks for joining me, and until next time, Solanjava.
Barrel Room Chronicles is a production of First Reel Entertainment and is distributed by Anchor FM and is available on Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, Amazon, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.